Welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Bryce, talking to you about you and your business. Going to spend some time with Tom Dailey. He's the CEO of a company called 2Checkout, or simply find it at 2co.com, which sounds like another robot from Star Wars. How are you, my friend?
Doing well, Kevin. Thank you very much.
Were you inspired by Star Wars when you came up with your address there?
Well, I am from that era, but to be honest with you, one of the reasons we came up with a name that begins with 2 is because that makes us appear first in directory listings. So that's helpful to us.
Yeah, okay. Here, I thought you were a principal, but you're just a capitalist like the rest of us. Tom, kind of give us the elevator speech about 2Checkout.
Sure. Well, 2Checkout is a global e-commerce payment processing firm. So we process credit cards and other forms of payments for about 10,000 websites all over the world. And we manage the payment process, the fraud and risk process, and then language, currency, and local payment complexities on behalf of the merchant.
Okay. And what is a similar company that we may have heard of that's in the same domain space as you?
Well, probably the closest comparison would be PayPal. PayPal does not have quite the international focus that we do, or as much of a focus on enabling a merchant to accept payments from customers in 196 countries, which is what we do. But they're certainly good at what they do, and there's certainly a David and Goliath kind of situation with us. But we're pretty good at the international payments piece. Okay.
And what size companies is a typical customer of yours?
So our customers are as small as $25,000 a year, or the currency equivalent. We have customers as big as $20 million a year, and that's pretty much the range that we serve.
So you're from some very really hobby. I mean, who's making a living off of $25,000 anymore? But all the way up to big small business. Larger are at the edge of mid-market, or basically mid-market, really mid-market business.
Yeah, that's true. Some of our smaller merchants are independent business people who may have a business on the side and they just have something interesting to sell. And then, for example, one of our largest merchants happens to be the largest e-commerce clothing retailer in India. So it really runs the gamut.
Interesting. So how old is the company? Kind of give us a history of it.
Sure. The company's been around since the year 2000. It was really founded on the premise that for a merchant to get up and running, accepting payments on the web is a very complicated thing, especially if you want to sell internationally, because you have to think about not just who's going to process your payment, but how can you get some comfort around validating that the customer is real and isn't involved in any kind of high risk or fraud situation. And then around the world, although in the United States, we're very familiar with MasterCard and Visa as the primary payment methods, that's not true all over the world. For example, if you live in the Netherlands, a payment method called Ideal is bigger than MasterCard or Visa. If you live in Germany, there's a company called GiroPay and so forth. And so for a merchant who's selling internationally, they may not have that knowledge or expertise. They may not understand that they would need to be able to process that particular payment type to appeal to a merchant or customer in that country. And so that's what our platform does. We present the checkout in the language and the currency and the payment method that's most appropriate for that merchant's customer without them having to think about it.
GiroPay, for some reason that name makes me hungry. But anyway, let me ask you then, it's interesting, you got started the same time, the same year as PayPal.
That's right. The company's genesis was about the same time. That's true.
Yeah. So I'm guessing at that time there was a pretty big void or a big stumbling block, if you will, in terms of how to take care of these people.
That's true. The Internet, of course, was more in a formative stage at that point. E-commerce was sort of just starting to take off globally. And what was going on at that time is more traditional credit card processors who were used to dealing with the physical card acceptance environment were trying to figure out how to do things on the Internet. MasterCard and Visa really didn't have rules and regulations figured out. The fraud management piece of how you validate a customer who's buying on the web wasn't fully developed. And so there weren't a lot of companies who were doing it well. And, of course, since then, e-commerce has just exploded. It's grown at double-digit rates every year since then, and doesn't show any sign of letting up anytime soon, especially in some of the developing markets like India. It's just exploding.
It seems to me there's probably several advantages, and you might be able to tell me some of them. But it seems to me like, for example, PayPal is almost the entity itself, and anyone who uses PayPal, it almost has an implied small business about it, even though large companies use it. Whereas yours has a certain amount of discretion where it really can be more about the product or service itself. Do you think that might be one of the reasons why your company is attractive?
I do. One of the things that merchants tell us is that they want the checkout experience to be entirely branded under the merchant, and they don't want it to feel like a broken experience where the customer is making the payment. So they don't want to feel like the customer is leaving the merchant's website to go make a payment and then coming back to the merchant's website just for brand convenience purposes and frankly, to make sure that there's no drop-off in the payment process. So we sit in the background. We're very transparent. In most cases, the customer doesn't know that they're using two checkouts for the payment process. So we're much more transparent. I think in the case of PayPal, they're much more focused on consumers thinking about PayPal as a payment brand or a payment method, similar to MasterCard and Visa and so forth. And so as a result, they're a little bit more concerned about being out in front with their payment brand. We're happy to be in the background and just provide great payment processing for the merchant.
So how's 2013 been for you?
It's been another growth year. The majority of our business occurs outside the United States borders. We're seeing explosive growth in India because India has not traditionally been a wired country, and what's happening there is there's an amazing wireless explosion with cell phones and tablets and smartphones, and so e-commerce is really going crazy there. Europe is a major growth market for us as well, and in some ways, markets like Europe are a little bit more advanced in terms of consumer behavior around buying on the web and using various electronic payment methods. And so, the U.S. is certainly the most competitive market. It happens to be the most robust and largest market, so it'll always be very important to us. But we also think emerging markets like Europe and certainly India and a few other places in the world are great opportunities for growth.
Tom Dailey has been our guest. He's CEO of 2Checkout. That's 2co.com. Are you purposefully not operating among the enterprise-level companies?
Well, what happens is when you become a processor for very, very large merchants, the value proposition really becomes all about price and less around the bundle of services that we provide. And there are some companies that do that very well and have very high velocity engines built to do that. We've really engineered our solution around a bundled solution that includes all the bells and whistles, again, around language, currency, fraud management, and so forth. And it's just designed for sort of that mid-market merchant rather than a super high-velocity merchant.
Very cool. Tom Dailey, CEO of 2Checkout. That's 2co.com. Thanks for being with us.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much.
Is that the best website for them to go to, by the way, 2co?
2co.com or 2checkout.com. Either one of those sites will get you to us.
Thanks so much. When we come back, much more for you. I do want to remind you, best content here shows up over there at usdailyreview.com. While there, like it on Facebook, follow it on Twitter.